Last July, I stood over a row of blackberry canes. I had nursed them for 2 seasons, watched them do what every conventional fruit bush does, eventually, dying in the central Texas heat. They dropped their leaves in a single afternoon, not gradually, and not with warning. One day they looked tired. The next morning, the ground beneath them was carpeted in crisp brown foliage like a tree in November. After $47 in nursery stock and 18 months of careful watering on a schedule, the only harvest I got was a handful of shriveled drupelets that tasted like warm disappointment. Here is what nobody at the garden center told me. Those plants were never going to work. They didn't fail because I watered incorrectly, forgot to mulch, or skipped a bag of soil amendment. They failed because they were bred for a climate that does not exist where I live. They were designed for reliable summer rain, moderate afternoons, and deep, loamy ground. Meanwhile, I am gardening on a limestone shelf where surface soil temperatures hit 130 degrees in August, where rain vanishes for 40 days at a time, and where the water bill to keep landscapes alive costs more than the groceries they were supposed to replace. This is not a personal failure, it is a systemic one. Millions of gardeners across the American Southwest, the high desert, and the brutal heat corridors of Texas are locked inside the same losing equation. The nursery industry sells plants selected for the Pacific Northwest. Watering guides assume unlimited access to cheap water. Fertilizer bags assume your soil is biologically active, rather than alkaline clay that repels moisture like a parking lot. Every input you buy is calibrated for someone else's reality, and when the plant dies, the system simply tells you to try harder and buy another. I know this because I have the receipts. I have paid for dead blueberries that hated a pH above 6, raspberries that rotted at the crown after a late monsoon, and drought-tolerant figs that split in a February freeze because they lacked the proper rootstock. Each failure cost between $30 and $70, plus the invisible cost of the water poured onto dying plants. The grocery store is no longer a safety net, either when a pint of organic blackberries costs $6 and a single loquat runs close to $2. The backup plan of growing your own food feels quietly rigged against anyone outside a temperate paradise. So, what actually works, not what the catalog promises, but what actually survives in cracked alkaline ground under relentless sun? I stopped asking the nursery industry and started asking the land itself. I looked at what was thriving in the margins, in abandoned lots and on old homesteads, where no one had irrigated in decades. Yet fruit still hung heavy on the branches. What I found changed everything about how I grow food. It starts with a single principle the conventional gardening world refuses to teach. The right plant in the right system doesn't need you to save it. It saves itself and feeds you in the process. Over 3 years, I spent north of $400 on premium garden soil, synthetic fertilizers, weed barriers, and drip irrigation, all just to grow some blackberries. Meanwhile, a wild agarita bush down the trail outproduced them for free. That bush has fruited on the same limestone slope for decades, without a single granule of 10-10-10 fertilizer, or a pass of a rototiller. Similarly, a quince bush 2 counties over drops golden fruit every October right into untouched ground. No one amended its soil or tested its pH. The bush simply grew because the ground beneath it was alive, in ways that bagged potting mix will never be. This is the quiet truth. The fertilizer industry will never print on a label every time you scatter synthetic nutrients. You short-circuit a transaction that was already happening underground. Mycorrhizal fungi, miles of threads thinner than human hair. They attach to root tips, bartering phosphorus and trace minerals for the sugars plants manufacture through photosynthesis. High-salt fertilizers destroy these fungal walls on contact. You don't just feed the plant, you sever it from the free network that was already sustaining it, making it entirely dependent on your next purchase. Tilling causes identical devastation. A rototiller shreds that fungal web into disconnected fragments in a dry climate. Recolonization takes months, and it may never fully recover. Before the next tilling tears it apart again. The gardener tills, the network dies, the plant starves. The gardener fertilizes, and the cycle of dependency Locks in. You're no longer gardening. You're paying rent on soil that used to work for free. Herbicides are even more insidious because their damage is invisible. Glyphosate doesn't just kill weeds. It binds soil micronutrients like zinc and iron, making them unavailable to living roots, while suppressing the microbial populations needed to access them. When your fruit bush yellows, you assume a deficiency, and then you go buy liquid micronutrients. The industry offers another product rather than admitting their first spray caused the damage. It is a brilliant business model. Sell the problem, then sell the solution. The feedback loop is so slow that most gardeners blame their brown thumbs. I blamed myself for years, not realizing I had carpet bombed the living networks in my soil with the very products I was told would help. Plants like the quince and a self-sufficient Texas persimmon never needed my amendments. They needed me to stop killing the system designed to support them. Once you see this, the frustration shifts. It stops being about your skill and starts being about what you were sold. The real question becomes, how do you rebuild that ground-level infrastructure? Underneath a Chickasaw plum thicket, the roots are wrapped in a thread-like mesh of mycorrhizal fungi that extends dozens of feet, mining nutrients from limestone crevices. In exchange, the plum feeds the fungus sugars built from sunlight. This is a transaction that has been running continuously for decades. Beneath a wild agarita bush, bacteria break down organic acids. Protozoa release nitrogen directly into the root zone, and fungal threads bind soil particles to hold moisture. Like a sponge, the agarita didn't just overcome its environment, it built a microenvironment around itself. When you dump soluble fertilizer onto soil, microbes starve. Because the plant stops producing root exudates, the fungal network thins, soil aggregates fall apart, and water runs right through. You didn't help the plant, you made it an attic standing in dead ground. Conversely, a pomegranate rooted in living soil pulls water from rock fractures 3 feet below the surface via hyphal pipelines. It operates on a closed-loop, self-funding system that accelerates. Over time, a Chickasaw plum thicket creates its own microclimate, dropping the ambient summer air temperature by 8 to 12 degrees and preserving soil moisture for weeks. It is not merely surviving drought. It is engineering local conditions where drought functionally does not exist. The mechanisms of this soil food web were documented decades ago, but the industry found it more profitable to sell inputs than to admit the soil could do the work for free. The law was never lost from nature, it was lost from us. The key to building a food-producing garden in dry ground is shifting from fighting scarcity to simply stepping out of the way. The lever for success is not more effort. It is the deliberate decision to stop. A mature fig tree develops roots so aggressively efficient at chasing moisture that constant irrigation actually weakens it. If you water deeply once and walk away for 2 weeks, those roots dive deeper, finding moisture reserves your hose could never reach. The plant becomes drought-proof, specifically because you did less. Varieties like Texas ever-bearing reward this neglect with 2 full crops a season. Prickly pear operates on the same logic. Despite its status as a cultural symbol, few plant it intentionally, reflecting our internalized belief that growing food must be difficult. Yet, sticking a single pad in well-drained ground yields decades of continuous green nopales and sweet late summer fruits. The plant stores its own water, treating extended droughts as just another Tuesday, with an investment of just a pair of tongs and leather gloves. The ratio of effort to output feels like a mistake, until you remember this plant spent thousands of years optimizing for these conditions. Every one of these plants, fig, prickly, pear, pomegranate, performs better when you reduce intervention to almost nothing. The ecological lever is the stack of techniques you remove. No daily watering schedules, no fertilizers, no raised bed amendments. You plant once in the right spot, water deeply during establishment, and walk away. You let root systems and evolutionary memory do what they have done since before agriculture had a name. The resulting fruit, ripened fully on the branch, has a quality that grocery stores simply cannot replicate. There will come a morning when the grocery store shelves look thin. The lettuce will be priced at $7. and the pale, tasteless tomatoes will have been picked weeks too early in those moments of supply disruption. The distance between the person who grows food and the person who doesn't becomes the distance between composure and panic. I think about this when I look at my jujube tree, producing in hostile, alkaline soil under 105-degree heat, without meaningful rain. Its branches bend under the weight of honey apple-flavored fruit, planted 7 years ago for less than the cost of a month of groceries. It asks nothing of me. Operating purely on genetics designed for arid landscapes. Beside it, a Texas persimmon drops hundreds of deeply amber, brown sugar-scented fruits every November, while a feijoa along the fence drops fruit, tasting of pineapple, strawberry, and mint. I do not manage them, I just show up and eat. This is a food system acting as an ecology rather than an industry. These plants produce abundantly because I put the right organism in the right place. And then I just got out of the way. Their roots dive into limestone that would starve a conventional blueberry, while mycorrhizal networks unlock hidden moisture. None of this requires wealth or advanced expertise. A bare root juju, a native persimmon, and 2 cross-pollinating feijoas cost under $100. The real cost is simply time, waiting while biology does the work it has always done. When humans stop interrupting it, when supply chains hiccup again, and freight costs push the price of every pear out of reach, one household will be quietly standing in their backyard, pulling jujus from a branch, and collecting warm feijoas from the ground. The pantry will hold dried fruit, and the freezer will hold persimmon pulp. There is no panic, because there is no dependency. The food is not arriving on a delayed truck from 1,000 miles away. It is growing 12 feet from the back door, in soil everyone said could produce nothing. That is not gardening. That is sovereignty. It is quiet, unglamorous, and absolute. The return on the decision to step back and let the land work is not measured in dollars saved at the register. It is measured in the absence of fear.